Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for another edition of the Curtain Call. My name is Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, hanging out with you, as always, with one Mr. Jeffrey Benedict. Jeffrey, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Doing good. I'm doing good, Mike.
Well, it's the first show since the Super Bowl. Just your overall general thoughts on Tampa Bay, Tom Brady winning his 7th ring.
I actually was rooting for Tampa Bay over Kansas City. Especially, I love Tom Brady winning and Bill Belichick missing the playoffs because Tom Brady's the NFC's problem. If we're gonna face him in the Super Bowl, I'm okay with that because we're in the Super Bowl. Other than that, he's the NFC's problem, but we don't have to worry about dealing with him. So I'm happy with that, and I just love seeing Bill Belichick have a terrible season and Tom Brady win a Super Bowl. Because I hate Bill Belichick way more than I do Tom Brady.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I feel the same way. Since Tom left the Patriots, my hate of Tom Brady is slowly declining, as much as that might anger some Steeler fans. But I still very much enjoyed watching the Patriots lose a lot. So yeah. Maybe it's just that color scheme in New England that just makes my blood boil. But this is where we're at now. But what did you think of Bruce Arians, the former Steelers offensive coordinator, lead charge down now in Tampa Bay? Two-time coach of the year since he left the Steelers, now Super Bowl champion. And just your overall thoughts on him and his job that he did in the Super Bowl.
Well, he had his coaching staff was heavily tied to Pittsburgh. He's got Larry Foote and Antoine Randall, Byron Leftwich. They're all in there. I loved what he's done building that team. I like what he's done. He's been I have a passing game. He's got himself a really good run game coordinator, and they won that game with the run game and the defense. Tom Brady, I said partway into the game, I'm like, Tom Brady's going to get this MVP, but it's not him. The game was won on defense and then sealed with the run game. But that's a good team. I love what he did there. I love the team he built. I love that defense. Absolutely love what Tampa Bay's done on that defense.
Now, I know you have some some thoughts on kind of the makeup of that Buccaneers coaching staff. So if you want to share those, by all means.
All right, we'll do this now. Yeah. Buccaneers actually have a ton of coaches. They have 29 total coaches, counting Bruce Arians. But if you get to his 28 assistants, 14 of them are either minorities or women, right? You've got 14 white guys and you got 14 coaches who are either African-American or he's got 2 women. In an era where we're talking and there's constant debate about is it a problem that there's not more, minorities in coaching? Is it a problem that we see so many players are African-American and yet so few coaches are? And then you've got a guy like Eric Bieniemy who can't get a chance. You've got even though what he's done with Kansas City is incredible, you got Todd Bowles who got a chance, and then nobody wanted to hire him for anything. Bruce Arians picks him up as his defensive coordinator, and that team, they outcoached Kansas City, and furthermore, Bruce, I think it's his assistant head coach, his offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and his special teams coach. They're all African-American. There's no white dudes on there. It's just, you got Bruce, the whitest dude in the world. And then the rest of his staff is not. And what I wanted to point out with that is what you expect to see statistically. As a person, I did a lot with economics and I love statistics. So I do a lot with that stuff. That is what you expect to see if you have someone who is looking at the hiring situation in the NFL and says, okay, you know what? Maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's something that people are getting passed over based on race. Maybe people aren't getting fair opportunities. So let's hire them. Let's bring him in. Let's go get a Todd Bowles when he's, not popular right now. Let's bring in a Byron Leftwich. Let's bring in a bunch of these guys. Brings in players. That's one of the things people are like, players don't always make good coaches. Well, look at his staff. Offense coordinator is a former quarterback. His Larry Foote's their inside linebackers coach. Antoine Randall's coaching there. All of that's happening. He brings in those players. He's doing all this stuff that people are giving as excuses for why, that's not a real thing. It's the hiring's fair. It's just they haven't proven themselves. He's given them a chance, and he suddenly has like one of the best teams in the NFL, and the best team this year. One of the women on his staff are an assistant defensive line coach. If you watch that Super Bowl, Tampa Bay's defensive line just dominated that game. They flat out dominated that game. So to me, if we're talking about, race and hiring in the NFL, one of the things people need to look at is what Bruce Arians just did with a staff of a lot of people who weren't getting chances elsewhere. And he gave them the opportunity, and they flat out out-coached one of the best coached teams in the NFL. Andy Reid's coaching staff is no joke. He is always assembles good staffs. They're always a well-coached team, and they just got out-coached by Tampa Bay.
So then when you reflect that to like the Steelers coaching staff, and if I'm not mistaken, they either have the least total coaches on a team or like in the bottom 5. Compare that to the Buccaneers, of course, who lead the league, like you said, 32 coaches. Is that right?
29 right now.
29 right now. So
they're one of the highest.
Could the Steelers take something from that and potentially, do you think there might be something with too many cooks in the kitchen, or clearly they won the Super Bowl? Would you want the Steelers to take an approach like the Buccaneers had?
I really would. Like we talked last summer, they talked about how Todd Haley was doing all this work with the run game. And I'm like, he's the quarterback's coach. Like, if he's working with the run game, who's working with Mason Rudolph?
Matt Canada, but yeah.
Matt Canada. I'm sorry. Who was I saying?
Todd Haley.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone. Matt Canada. Matt Canada is working and putting all the motion in the run game, and he's the quarterback's coach. Like, who's working with the quarterbacks? They don't have a run game coordinator. They don't have one. Bruce Arians, run game coordinator, he's assistant head coach / run game coordinator. The dude was with the Steelers in 2007, with the Steelers for Bruce Arians' run here as a coach. And he was assistant offensive line coach and like head of, what was it called? The scouting people, offensive quality control. Quality control coordinator, something like that. But basically he did the run game, advanced scouting, and he helped with the offensive line. Like, that's what he did. And when Bruce Arians left there, he's taken him every single other place he's gone. And I found that interesting. I actually went back and looked because of that. I looked at our rushing numbers when Bruce Arians was here. And outside of the Le'Veon Bell years, they're better than anything we've seen since. Like, you're talking like that offensive line fell apart after 2007 when we ran the ball all over everybody. And then, like, we still ran better from those years than we do now. And Bruce Arians is not a run game. He's not a running guy, but he had a special dude that that's his job. He's the run game coordinator. He kept him, and he's still there. He's there in Tampa Bay. And how did they win that game? They ran the ball to seal the game. There's a reason he's Bruce Arians' assistant head coach, and that is he's that good at what he does, which is make sure the team runs successfully. So I think there is room for those kind of positions. There's room for those advanced scouts. I love that the Steelers hired a quality control person to be an advanced kind of scouting dude. I'd like to see more. I'd like to see, a quarterback's coach whose job is just to coach the quarterbacks, and not like you're a quarterback's coach / assistant offensive coordinator. Like, come on, like give real code, like give the guys a chance to really do their job. Don't give them multiple jobs.
Now, like you did mention, the Steelers brought in offensive quality control coach for the first time since the offensive coach of the Steelers held the same responsibilities in 2018. Matt Tomshaw is his name. He was with Matt Canada at Louisiana State, at Pitt. He was also there with him at Maryland. Can you explain more what kind of that coach does for a team? I'm sure there's people that don't have experience with the quality control coach. And then what if there's any excitement that Matt Canada really has his guys with him in Pittsburgh?
I think it's important that he did spend time with Matt Canada. People always talk about like, oh, Tomlin hires people he's coached with before. Well, yeah, if you look at Bruce Arians' list of coaches, like Todd Bowles was a player for him when he coached at Temple in like the 80s. And like he just hired another dude who he has another dude on his staff who was a coaching assistant back then. Like you hire people you've worked with, that you've seen and and you've worked with. So Matt Canada getting this guy that he's worked with before is good, because this guy knows what Matt Canada wants to see. He's had time to learn other places. They're not going to be learning on the fly and be like, nope, that's not what I needed. And, that wasn't helpful this week. He already knows what he's looking for, what kind of keys, what kind of defensive cues that they can, run the offense off of and look at. Offensive quality control coaches largely are film watchers. They're guys watching film of your team. They're watching films of other teams, and they're sitting there thinking weeks ahead. Like, they've got a couple of teams on the book, and they're watching the film saying, how is this team likely to defend us? How have they defended teams that do things that we do? How do they defend this kind of motion? What do they do when a team runs a jet sweep motion? How do they cover that? What do they do if it's a pass? What do they do if it's a run? They're looking at all this stuff so that when you get to the point where, as an offensive coordinator, you're like, all right, now we're switching off of the team we're just faced to the next team, you have like a book in front of you. Like, you have a script in front of you that this person that who knows what to look for, knows what information to give you, is saying, this is what we expect from them. This is how we should attack them. This is what they would probably do to counteract these different things. They've done all that film work while you were working on the previous team, putting that together, dealing with the team. So they don't have to deal with, like, ideally, they're not really dealing with players as much. They're dealing with watching the film and coming up with, watching for tricks, watching for little things you can pick up to take advantage of when you do face them.
Yeah, and continuing with the coaching stuff, I know when we're talking about prepping for the show, we talked about a little about head coaches, and if they fail as a head coach, what it means for them coming down to, say, be a coordinator or a positional coach. And we didn't really get too much into it, but for me, I always thought typically when those guys are brought in, you typically see some sort of rejuvenation and breath of fresh air. I'm curious whether or not you see the same thing, and if you kind of prefer seeing these flame out head coaches being someone that could be a replacement as a coordinator or positional coach.
I'm a big fan of it. Todd Bowles was phenomenal for Tampa Bay. Often you see that. Often when you get a guy who got a shot at a head coach, it's because he did a phenomenal job as a coordinator, or really phenomenal job as a position coach who also happens to be a great coach, period. Like a Mike Munchak. Went straight from offensive line coach to head coach. He didn't work there. Went back to offensive line coach. He was great. Todd Bowles just did that. And one of their coaches, I don't know if it's like their assistant defensive coordinator / one of their position coaches. He was the defensive coordinator for Todd Bowles in New Jersey on the New York Jets. So like they moved out and they just, okay, that didn't work. So we'll move you back down into position you're more familiar and you stay with the team. Oftentimes people go up a step when they're not ready. Sometimes it's because, like, especially with head coaches, sometimes they're a great coach, but they don't have a staff. Right? They don't know a good offensive coordinator yet. They don't have that together. They haven't worked with an offensive coordinator. You don't do that. You're not in meetings with the offensive coordinator being, how do we make this work? No. So sometimes they don't have a staff together, but sometimes it doesn't matter. They're still a great coach. They're just not ready to be a head coach, or maybe they're not even head coaching material, but they've shown themselves to be a great coach. That's why they got that chance. They have some special talent. And even if it doesn't work out on that level, they're probably still really good at their job just to get that shot. So yeah, like Hugh Jackson, nobody wants to touch Hugh Jackson. Nobody wants to touch him. He's phenomenal. He has been a phenomenal quarterbacks coach, and he was a really good offensive coordinator. And he was a pretty solid head coach, just not a great one. Same with Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis, like Cincinnati was absolutely trash. They hired Marvin Lewis, went to the playoffs a bunch, but now couldn't get over the hump. So let's hire someone new, and now they're trash again. They're absolute trash again. And it's like, but people don't want to hire Marvin Lewis. Why? Like, dude, the guy's good. Like he's the only reason the Bengals were good. So I'm all about that. I love if a coach didn't work out when they got another, they went up the ladder, bring him in. I mean, that's the Steelers. Look at the Steelers. Dick LeBeau. Come on, Mike Munchak. Some of our favorite coaches there. Todd Haley ran a heck of an offensive system in Pittsburgh. He wasn't a good head coach, but they earned those shots.
Yeah, like I was just going to say, like, that coach staff, I'd say 2015, it had four former or current head coaches in that coaching staff. It really was one of the best staffs the Steelers have had in some time. And since then, I would say they haven't had anything to that level.
Yeah.
Now, taking a step back to the Super Bowl, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about that Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. And they had Stefan Wisniewski, the former Steeler, there for about a cup of coffee. But I know Dave Schofield, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, was chatting about this a little bit yesterday, mentioning that you two had a conversation about Kevin Dotson. If the Chiefs decided to go that way in the third round, perhaps they might be the team celebrating today. What are your thoughts on Dotson and the Chiefs' offensive line?
Well, they drafted in the third round. They drafted an offensive lineman. They drafted a tackle. I'm trying to see if I can find it here real quick, but I don't think I can. All right. But they drafted an offensive tackle. I can't find his name. And he never played. He didn't play at all this season. And so I'm watching this film, and the second half of the game, where everyone's waiting for Kansas City to come back, and you're watching Tampa Bay just absolutely attack Stefan Wisniewski, and not just him, but like sending multiple guys at that gap and attacking their communication. And so I looked into it, and the story of the offensive line is something for me that's a great lesson we can take away from this, and also something we can appreciate as Steelers fans from our past here. 2019, they had Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz at tackle. Eric Fisher is not as good as his draft stock was when he was drafted, but he's very solid. Mitchell Schwartz was one of the best tackles in football. They had, he's Canadian. I'm going to miss he's French Canadian. Duvernay Tardif.
Pretty close. Yeah.
He was one of their guards. And then they had a guy by the name of Andrew Wiley, was kind of a cast off and had found their way there. He ended up starting for the Chiefs in 2019. He's the one who was injured late in the season. Wisniewski comes in and is playing between Fisher and their center, something Ryder. I only have his last name down. But and he's playing well there. What's his name? Wiley comes back, is healthy to play for the playoffs, and they leave him on the bench because the guy who replaced him is playing really good. And the line is playing really good. So they're like, we're not messing with it. We're not putting you back in. And I read that. I remember that from that Super Bowl. And I'm just like, what the Steelers did this season when Kevin Dotson was playing great. And then like, Matt Filer's back and they're like, oh, you're the starting guard again. And then the Browns killed him. Like he was not 100%. And the Steelers like, nope, he's the dude. Keep him in there. He's playing all game. It's awful. It's not good. But then so that's one tie-in that I want to do. But the next season, Duvernay Tardif, did I say it right? Is that better?
Hold it. It was beautiful.
Okay. He opts out. Great story, in my opinion. He opted out. He was working in a nursing home, and he was taking care of people. And he's like, during COVID, I can't leave these people. So he like passed on a year in the NFL to like make barely anything to do his to pursue his love of medicine and helping people, which is cool. So he opts out. Schwartz, I believe is injured, gets injured. Fisher gets injured. Like they lose all their offensive linemen, right? Be either in free agency or to injury. They take a guy, Wiley, and they're like, you're just going to be our starter. Wisniewski goes to the Steelers, and they have very little depth. And then they lose like a couple more people to injury, and they're in bad shape. So I was watching that, like the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, they put their starting guard at tackle and slid Wisniewski in at guard. And in the second half of that game, Tampa Bay is just running blitzes straight at that gap, right at the center tackle guard on Wisniewski's side. They're attacking it all day because those guys, you've got a guy out of position and you got a guy who hasn't been playing with him in between. Like the communication wasn't good there and they just got blown up. And that really stood out to me because people will talk about, the offensive line. The offensive line, Patrick Mahomes had some time. They had chances to make plays in the first half, but the coverage was phenomenal, and that just wasn't there. There were so many times Patrick Mahomes is running. If you get when I was watching the All-22 film, he was running because he didn't have anyone to throw to. No one was open. They just had the team defended. Second half, they get Eric Bieniemy in there. He does what he does, and they makes their second half adjustments, which is what the Chiefs are famous for. You can stop them in the first half. Second half, they come and blow you up. But in the second half, Tampa Bay adjusted, and their big adjustment was, we're going straight at that gap. We're going right at their right guard, right at Stefan Wisniewski, and we're just going to attack there. And they kept getting pressure on Mahomes. And if you watch that second half, if you have access to all 22 film, there's passes to make. There's guys open, but he is running for his life and can't stop and look back the other way because he's running to his right. They just absolutely pressured him in the second half and destroyed him because of that. So I made the point that if they had drafted Kevin Dotson in the third round instead of drafting a tackle who never played in the whole season, they'd win the Super Bowl. We saw Kevin Dotson step in. We saw him play people like DeForest Buckner. We saw teams blitz his section, and they handled it. The Steelers handled it. Like, he was solid all season. If they had made that step, right, they win the Super Bowl, because instead of Wisniewski, it's Kevin Dotson. And that second half of that game, Mahomes has time to throw. He has time to find the people. He's making plays. So that was takeaways for me, and it made me think a lot about the 2008 Steelers and how they lost so much. Faneca left in free agency. Marvel Smith went down. Like, the only person they returned was Willie Colon, and that was before Willie Colon moved to guard and was good. Like, he moved to guard eventually and was pretty good, but this was when he wasn't good. And so that's the only holdover they had from 2007 when the offensive line was really good. And yet that Steeler team won the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes couldn't. With a patchwork offensive line, Patrick Mahomes couldn't win the Super Bowl. Ben Roethlisberger did it. So that's in my opinion. I've said it before. I tell people this all the time when they like, oh, Ben, how good is he? No other quarterback wins the Super Bowl on that 2008 Steelers team with that offensive line. Nobody. Ben Roethlisberger did that. Patrick Mahomes couldn't. So that's one of my takeaways.
No, and it is definitely extremely similar. The two situations, the offensive line, of course, the Chiefs had a decent offensive line before everyone got hurt, but you can see what just one game of getting killed turned Mahomes into, and what Ben Roethlisberger was able to do over what? They got the bye week, so 19 weeks. He was killed each and every one of those games. For me, one of my biggest takeaways of the Super Bowl was how well-rounded that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense was. Perhaps every single unit wasn't elite, but if they weren't, they were damn close. One of the things I really took away from the game, too, is that they didn't have any necessary hole on their defense. And one of the things that screamed to me when relating that to the Steelers is they need to figure out the guy that's beside Devin Bush. To me, that's the way it looked like, because watching Levante David and Devin White take that game over, to me, it was screaming, if we can pair Devin Bush with someone, this Steelers defense is going to be locked down. That could be in the draft with someone like Zaven Collins, who, to me, I've absolutely fallen in love with. His film, his clutchness, his size, everything just jumps off the paper to me. Perhaps they don't want to go linebacker again in round one, and maybe they go the avenue of Gerard Davis out of Detroit, who some rumors were popping up even today that teams view him as someone who's a quality linebacker in this league, but was just properly used in Detroit. So I'm curious your thoughts on that regarding the defense and how the Steelers could potentially try to boost up their unit by being more well-rounded throughout the entire unit.
Tampa Bay took, if you remember before the draft, I wanted Tampa Bay's safety. I wanted the guy they got. They took him. One of the things I loved in Tampa Bay did this. One of the things Todd Bowles did in the first half was he would line three guys deep in, like, just straight up, like looked like fullbacks in soccer. If you ever see a soccer field where there's just three guys just standing back there waiting, they're 15 yards deep. Three guys just 15 yards deep. Boom. Like, just lined up on the defense. I'm looking at that. I'm like, what the heck are they doing? And then 1, 2 of them, however they wanted to do it, would step up. So they're already deep, ready for the deep routes to come, right? They're backed up, they're ready. And plus you have people attacking forward. And so as Mahomes, like, he's getting the snap, and then he has to look up and be like, okay, nope, they're actually in cover 3 this time. Or nope, they're in cover 1 this time and 2 guys are coming up. Or they're in cover 2, or, some variation of that. They're in a man. They were doing that stuff to him. I love that. I love when teams do that. The Steelers do a little bit of that. And it made me think, man, I wish we had 3. I wish we had that third safety, because I think that he would have helped, not taking anything away from the pick we did make. The picks we did, how we used our draft capital kind of worked out well for us, though. But I wanted to say I loved that. People are getting a lot of Devin White. Give Devin White a lot of credit here. He had a phenomenal season this year. A lot of impact. He had 9 sacks. He had 4. He had fumble recoveries. He had pass defenses. He was their attacking linebacker. Levante David was more in coverage, right? What we saw this season from Devin Bush was more of what Levante David did, where he's in coverage this year. Less of what he was last year. Last year, they really turned Devin Bush loose. And we got kind of exposed for it in coverage, a couple of times. This year, they were like, no, we're going to put you back in coverage and let you just dominate. And he did. He really did. And you saw other people collect those stats. So if the Steelers do pick up a really good linebacker, what you want is a playmaker. You want a guy who attacks forward, because Devin Bush is better at being that Levante David cover role than he is what Devin White was doing, where he's attacking and blitzing. Bush is actually not a great blitzer. I would say that is one of his weakest things. Not that he can't do it, not that he's bad at it. He's just not great at it. And he's great at like literally everything else he's great at. He's just not great at blitzing. So you'd want that kind of a player. And like, that's one of the reasons I started looking at Gerard Davies is he is that dude. He is exactly that dude. Detroit wanted him to be more a pass coverage guy, and that's not really his strength. So if he's covering like the number 2 tight end or a running back who's not really a great guy, like he's got that, he's fine, but he's better attacking. So I would be a big fan of that pickup, although we'll see how much attention he gets. He may be driven up, but also in the draft, like you said, there's plenty of them in the draft that are playmakers. That could be a great pickup. But it's not something we have to. I see a lot of people saying we have to find that guy. Don't sell Robert Spillane and Vince Williams short just yet. Vince was really good when Bush was playing. Robert Spillane showed traits that I think will go really well with Devin Bush. So I'm not worried about, finding that guy. If that's the best player available, or if, say, someone in free agency, say Gerard Davis doesn't get a lot of attention and you can scoop him up for a mid-range contract and get like, boom, you have an elite linebacker duo for cheaper, that'd be great. I would love that. But it's not something I would say a priority.
Now, it's funny, like, for me, one of my loves with Zaven Collins is that he can blitz and he can cover, and it's going to be inevitable that at some point Vince Williams and Robert Spillane are going to be asked to cover a slot receiver all game, and we're going to scream at our TVs collectively until the final whistle blows. So that's kind of why I like some of these other teams there.
No matter who it is, they're going to do that. It'll be Alex Highsmith. Alex Highsmith will be asked to cover guys in the slot, because that's how we do it. That's how we do it, is we do that, and then we put Minkah over top of him and be like, okay, if you're short, he's going to deal with you, and if you go long, your quarterback has to throw at Minkah Fitzpatrick.
All right, so I think that's going to wrap up the first half of this podcast, a little Super Bowl centric. The second half, we're going to turn our attention to the NFL's insane quarterback carousel, Ben Roethlisberger's contract extension that people were talking about, the offensive line, a whole bunch more other stuff. So if you're listening on the podcast platforms, just flip over to part 2 right now. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, just hang tight. We will be back in just a second. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for the second half of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, joined as always by Jeffrey Benedict. First half of the show really talked about the Super Bowl a lot, kind of how it relates back to the Steelers and kind of where they can kind of take this team moving into the future. But one of the biggest things going on right now for the Steelers and is going to shape at least the next 12 months is this Ben Roethlisberger extension that was supposed to go down some point this week. That being said, as I look at my watch here, it is currently at the time of recording, it's almost 10 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday night. The work week is more than half over. So, Jeffrey, is there any concern that the contract might not be done within what Ed Bouchette's kind of timeline that he gave out, or do you think this could be extended a little bit longer?
The Steelers don't really talk much. Like, they wait to announce things. So, in my opinion, it could be done now. We wouldn't know. Because until like they could be like, hey Ben, we got the details together. When do you want to get together and sign it? Let's do that like Saturday. You know, we have it figured out. We'll just wait 4 days and then we'll sign it. Like, they're not going to be in a hurry. They still got all the COVID protocols, all that nonsense going on. Shouldn't say nonsense. They got that stuff going on that they have to be mindful of. So I sound terrible when I say that, but anyways, so I expect it'll happen. I don't think they'll have any trouble with it because it's not going to affect Ben Roethlisberger's money much. Like, they're going to be like, okay, if you're willing to pay for less, how much less? Okay, we'll work that in. If you want to take less, we'll let you take less. But if he says I want every single penny, they'll just push all that money down the road. I don't know if we talked about Drew Brees' contract last week. I don't think we did.
I think that might have came out after the fact. So do you want to touch on what Drew Brees did and if the Steelers pull that?
When Drew Brees took a minimum contract for this year, his cap hit is almost entirely previous contract dead money on what's called void years. So they would sign him to what is a 3-year contract with 2 void years at the end, which all that does is that takes the guaranteed money from like the signing bonus and things that they're allowed to spread out over multiple years. And they can take a 3-year contract for Drew Brees and spread his signing bonus out for 5 years. Well, when they re-signed him, he still had 2 years of void contract dead money owed him. So like, you're signing him to a new deal, but he has dead money from his previous deal on there, even though he's no longer under contract. Like, he's not under contract. They just had void years. So they pushed it out again to more void years to push so that all the money that he just made, that he made last season, is basically going to be charged to their salary cap over like the next 3 years. Which is just like, they know he's not going to play. He's going to retire. And they're just still going to spread out the cap hit from 2018 and 2019 and 2020 are getting spread out over the next 3 years. The Steelers have never done that that I know of, but they could even do something like that. Like, if Ben's like, I'm going to play maximum of 2 more years, they could extend him out 4 years, but have 2 of them be void years and get whatever money he takes, boom, just spread it out. He would still have that 19 million cap hit. But then spreading out like that, you can get his cap hit all the way down to, league minimum plus his dead money. And that's a big deal. People, when they look at dead money, right? When they look at the cap hit that's not cash that player is getting, that is mechanisms the team did. That has nothing to do with it. Ben has nothing to do with that 19 million. That is Omar Khan. That is Omar Khan and Kevin Colbert coming together and saying, where do we want to pay this money in what year? When do we want this to hit? They did that. That has nothing to do with Ben Roethlisberger. He doesn't care when they pay the cap hit. I doubt Ben Roethlisberger gives 2 thoughts about when he trusts those guys. That's their job. You tell me what money I'm getting and when I'm getting paid, and I don't care when it hits the cap. That doesn't matter. So Ben has nothing to do with that, and how they choose to structure it. There's all kinds of options, including do the Drew Brees thing, give extra years on there and pay it down the road when the NFL salary cap is bounces back even higher.
We got BTSC co-editor Dave Schofield in comments. He does have an article on exactly what the Saints did. If you scroll back on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, you can check out all the information on that article up on the website. So as soon as you're done listening to this podcast, make sure to go click over to the website and check that out. But Jeffrey, in terms of this contract, it seems the most likely thing to have happen is those void years, especially if Ben only intends on playing one more season, which he's already under contract for. Is that the way you kind of see this playing out, or do you think it could go in a different direction?
Well, void years are interesting because they're like never intended to be played. Like they're not a real contract. It's a very weird thing. I would say check out Dave Schofield's article. He probably covers that better than I could. But what you know, the whole mechanism of void years. But I do expect them to push some contract back for Ben Roethlisberger. I expect them to make a deal that is set up for him to be able to play for like 3 years. That's kind of what I'm expecting. And also make it so, hey, you know, you could play these years or you could not play these years. And if you don't play these years, then you just get, you know, your signing bonus. If you do play these years, we'll pay you those years too, but make it so you can get out from under it. It's not like, you know, you're signing him to a 5-year deal. And if he retires after next year, you're completely screwed because you paid him 5 years worth of money. It's not going to be like that, but I expect them to do that because that's how they do business. They are the Rooneys are ride or die with Ben Roethlisberger, and I don't expect that to stop.
Yeah, no, it's really, those words are couldn't be any truer. I'd say Ben Roethlisberger has pretty much gotten everything he's ever wanted out of this team, and that really isn't a bold take either. When it comes to legends like Troy Polamalu and Heinz Ward, they got pushed out the door, and even this past week we saw, I believe it was like Taylor that was saying Ben should retire because he's detrimental to the team at this point. Do you believe that at all, or is that just media members trying to stir the pot?
Well, Ike Taylor, that could be legit, man. Like I see, I don't have any inside access to that locker room. I personally, I hope Ben comes back. I don't think Mason and Devin and Haskins, I don't think Rudolph and Haskins are ready. And I don't want to invest in a quarterback right now. I've talked about it before. I want an offensive line. Rebuild the line first, then get a quarterback. That's my mind on that. So I don't want Ben to leave quite yet, but I'm not willing to invest in him either. Again, look at going to the Super Bowl. Tom Brady in that game. You look at the first 5, 6, 7 games of the Steelers season, and you look at what Tom Brady did against Kansas City, and you tell me the difference between what Ben Roethlisberger was doing early this season and what Tom Brady did in the Super Bowl. I've said this before. If you look at I wrote an article about the importance of the Steelers running the ball. When Ben Roethlisberger had a run game early in the Steelers season, he was a dark horse MVP candidate, playing kind of like Tom Brady did there. He wasn't putting up the yards, but his touchdown interception efficiency was ridiculous. His completion percentage was great. Like he's just making plays, and the Steelers were running the ball. The run game went away, and all of a sudden, everyone's like, "Oh gosh, Ben Roethlisberger can't even play quarterback anymore. Like he's terrible. He's legitimately just terrible at quarterback." Well, yeah, he needs a run game. He doesn't have an Antonio Brown who can just get open no matter what. Like it's on that page with him, has that Wi-Fi. We've talked about that. Ben either needs that number one wide receiver that he really has that connection with, that it doesn't matter what the defense does. You know, you can't stop this offense because there's this guy and Ben, or he needs a run game. You have to have one of those two. So if the Steelers get the run game, Ben could pull a Tom Brady if they get that. And also the Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafted a tackle in the first round, and he started every single game, including the Super Bowl. They ran the ball. They won. Like, come on, Steelers. We also have a great defense. Like, we could do this. There's a pattern out there.
Yeah, there really is. And one of the reasons why I'm smiling right now is because you brought up Mr. Third and Fifth, who, I don't know if you heard it, he gave us another gem after the Super Bowl. He was asked whether or not he wants to return to Tampa Bay, and he says, "Of course I do. I want to go for the two-peat." Just like, this guy, like, the word is repeat. Why are you going to throw a two-peat in there? His lines are legendary.
I had not heard that. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, that is
Hey,
Antonio Brown.
hey, Central Michigan education right there. That's the fine folks. I know you're from Team Big Blue, so
Oh man, I
uh,
absolutely like. I'm not a huge. I'm not like I don't love it, but I'm glad Antonio Brown is like out of the news. Seems to have gotten himself in a place where he's at least stable. Like he is in at least a stable place right now. Um, and I just like that. I'm happy for him because he was phenomenal here until things went bad. And I'm choosing to like, okay, yeah, things went bad here. He had to go. But I don't view him as a villain. He gave us everything he had. There was no wide receiver who works harder than Antonio Brown. He was absolutely phenomenal here. And he got a Super Bowl ring. I'm okay with that. His touchdown catch was classic AB. He looked like he was running 4 routes at one time and then catches a ball thrown, at his knees. Just it's AB.
I think after the game, Tom Brady even said he ran the wrong route on that play. But hey, he scored a touchdown, so guess it doesn't matter.
AB makes the wrong routes good, right? He makes the
Exactly.
wrong route right. It doesn't matter.
And you know what? As we're continuing on with this kind of funny stuff, revolving around the Super Bowl, Dave Schofield again brings up Tom Brady staggering around. I don't know if you saw the clips of him at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers boat party, but it seemed like he had a couple of those avocado adult beverages. have you
He probably
seen
had like
that?
one beer. He's like,
Exactly.
I haven't drank alcohol. I only drink alcohol after I win the Super Bowl.
Somewhere I have the TB12 method, and yeah, it's like it probably was his first beer since he played in Michigan. It's probably the real situation. But getting back to the quarterback stuff now, outside of the Steelers and really the AFC North, like we talked about off air, the quarterback carousel in the NFL this year, it like legitimately there could be up to like 20 teams with a different starter from 2020 to 2021.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, maybe even Dak Prescott doesn't even get a deal in Dallas. Like there's a ton of talent at the quarterback position that could be playing elsewhere. What are your thoughts on this, and why is this happening all of a sudden?
It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy. I understand why it's happening. People are talking about quarterbacks wanting out and quarterbacks, like Watson and the power he is showing. The problem is quarterback, the way the NFL has engineered the league, it's a passing league. They have spent decades writing the rules to be all about the quarterback, and they have doubled down on them so hard in the last like 3-4 years to be like, you don't touch a quarterback, you don't touch their receivers, you just let the passing game be. Just leave it alone so we can get all these numbers and always have quarterbacks healthy. We don't want injured quarterbacks, and we want lots of stats because people like high-scoring football. That makes quarterbacks more important. It makes average quarterbacks look better than they do. I wrote this in my one article I was writing it. Dan Marino in 1992 led the NFL with stats that would put him firmly in like the middle of the league, like Mitchell Trubisky land. Like Steve Young's completion percentage from 92 when he was like setting the bar as like one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time for completion percentage would be 14th in the NFL this season. 14th and behind Mitchell Trubisky, right? That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Passer rating, like Steve Young was the first guy to ever put up 100 passer rating. Now, like people who aren't good put up 100 passer rating. People who aren't great, they're good quarterback, not great. The quarterback runs the offense. They are the most important player in the team. They are by far the most important position on the field, far more than they ever have been. They're getting paid more than they ever have. And when you give a quarterback that much money and you make that position that important, and you make starting quarterbacks in such a way that they have the idea that I should play quarterback and barely get hit. Then when you've got a guy like Russell Wilson taking hits, when you got a guy like Deshaun Watson taking hits, they're sitting there saying, well, why am I here? Why am I sticking around? Like I want to win a Super Bowl when I'm 43. I want to do that. Russell Wilson could, like he's that kind of talent level. But is he going to? No, he's getting the crap kicked out of him. You know, if he's going to keep getting beat up, him like Deshaun Watson, he shouldn't be taking those hits. So to me, looking at that, I'm like, yeah, the NFL has set themselves up for this, for quarterbacks to have a similar level of leverage that you see with stars in the NBA. And you're going to see it. You're going to see it in the future. I think you're going to see some NBA type moves too, where guys just, you know, pick their own destination and say, you're going to let me go and I'm going to go there because I said so.
Oh, I could only hope not. If the super team thing becomes a thing in the NFL, that's one of the things I love about football, especially the NFL. It's like, it really feels like any given Sunday is a legitimate thing. Like even the Jets, the putrid, horrible, should have been historically bad Jets won a couple games, and they beat the Browns, who beat the barn doors off this Steelers team. Yep. Like, really, it's. I hope we're not entering into that era, but in the world of quarterbacks, like you're saying, and their importance level, especially when it comes to the draft, the guys that typically would have filled out the first round, potentially second round guys, they're all getting selected in the top 10 because of how important they are. And when, to me, looking at the Steelers team, and even if Ben Roethlisberger played bad next year and it was his last year, I don't think they'll be anywhere bad enough to be selecting a top guy in the draft. So to me, it feels like if they're not drafting someone this year, they're going to be a team that will be involved in that kind of quarterback carousel of 2022. And if Dak Prescott, in fact, gets that franchise tag, you already kind of see the writing on the wall. Once someone gets a second franchise tag, they're basically gone the next year because it's 2 years of negotiations and you probably piss the player off to a degree as well. Do you think Dak Prescott could be a name if the Steelers just kind of move on from everyone on the roster? Because right now, none of them are under contract past that. Just to get my kind of bold, kind of strange take that I feel like that could happen. I kind of want to see your thoughts on potentially a Prescott Steelers match 2 years from now.
I honestly can't imagine that. I really can't. You're talking about a dude who wants more money than Jerry Jones wants to pay him.
It's true.
So like the Rooneys, yeah, they're not Jerry Jones. They are more team oriented. Like you prove it here, yeah, you get your money. I expect them to draft a quarterback and try and get those cheap years of great play from a quarterback. That's kind of more of their style. I wouldn't want Dak Prescott here. I don't know. Like, I love Dak Prescott. I don't know if he fits. He would. He'd be a good quarterback, but I don't. I also I want those cheap rookie years of a quarterback deal so we can keep that defense.
See, where this stems from for me is the Steelers have the most salary cap space as of this moment in 2022. Yeah. So that's kind of where it stems from. For people that don't know, the Steelers will have tons of cap to work with in the future. So
yeah, but that's TJ, Minka.
Well, TJ's next year, Minka's the year after that. But
yeah,
again,
they're gonna have to start looking at cap for those guys.
Oh, exactly. So like those deals will get done. It's. Say the Steelers do fix their offensive line in this year's draft to like they just go insane. They draft 3 guys. Would you be willing to move up in 2022? Like I know that's a draft class away, but like just looking at the landscape of the quarterback position, is that a like you kind of have to trade up if you want someone to start right away? Do you think the Steelers could move heaven and earth to get into the top 10 of a draft?
Okay, let me set the table for my trade up next year. My big move to get a top quarterback next year would be the Steelers do get the offensive line fixed and they make a deep playoff run, maybe win the Super Bowl. And however it is, it's enough that Ben Roethlisberger walks away a winner, right? He's like, I can walk away a winner. The defense is elite. Then you got the running game, you got the offensive line. Then you say, you know what? Do whatever it takes. You know, make the moves, get up there, get that quarterback. The problem is then if you're one of the top teams, you're moving up a big bunch of picks.
Yeah, I don't know if 32 to the top 10 is even possible.
Well, the other way to do it would be like they go into next season, Ben is legitimately terrible, but we can run the ball, and you end up like turning it over to Mason Rudolph, or Ben gets hurt, you know, and he's done, and Mason Rudolph plays out the season, and we're at like picking at like 15, 16 range. You know, like a 9-7 season, and then you could move up. Then you could do it.
Yeah, that might be the way it goes. Like again, once this Ben Roethlisberger contract situation is sorted out, then I guess we'll kind of see where the team goes from here. But I know, speaking of that offensive line and kind of making improvements to it, is something else we want to chat about tonight. So, of course, the Steelers have brought in, they boosted Adrian Clem from assistant to offensive line coach. Oh, I'm blanking on the name of the assistant O-line coach. I want to say it's like Curtis, something along those lines. As you look up, yeah, he was the he's been the prime O-line coach for 4 years in the NFL. He's also been a assistant offense line coach in the NFL. So like they have the experience now behind him. But what do you think of those moves, and how do the Steelers kind of continue to grow this offensive line and develop it into the next phase of this group?
Well, we're hearing more and more that Pouncey's going to retire. I think you know how I feel about that. I really would like him to stick around, most of all because I think we need to draft an offensive lineman, and Pouncey is a heck of a leader. You know, he's the kind of guy you want to see pass on to the next group of people. Kind of give Dotson another year to really develop next to him. I'd love to see it. If Pouncey is gone, center is an issue. And I don't know if the answer is in the draft. Like you can't take like a 3rd round pick and then be like, you're plugged in, day 1 starter, you're our dude, everything's on you. And that's not how the Steelers operate. The Steelers don't go into the draft with a position sitting there saying we need a starter. You know, we may not as fans like the starter they have, but they have someone they're willing to go into the season with. That's why, like, the Steelers picked up Mark Barron, and then they drafted Devin Bush. Well, they didn't really need Mark Barron then, but they signed Mark Barron because they needed an inside linebacker who could cover. Mark Barron was the best they had available. And if the teams in the draft just say no, you can't trade up and get Devin Bush, and you can't get him, or the price is just way too high, then you're riding with Mark Barron and, you know, Vince Williams as your starting linebackers in 2019. So the Steelers always have like a starter there. So if Pouncey's gone, you're talking free agency. We have to sign somebody in free agency. There is no way the Steelers can go into 2021 with J.C. Hassenauer as their starting center. You can't do that. So that's got to be a free agent. I don't even know what free agent centers are out there, but the Steelers will be having to comb through them and find somebody because you have to. I do expect a draft pick, but this year is really strong for the tackles and tackle/guard picks. So that's what I'm looking at is like, get yourself a tackle, maybe, you know, that will slide into guard, because there's going to be a spot at guard here in a year or two, you know, with DeCastro. He's not got long left. Somebody like that, someone flexible, someone that can do stuff like that's an elite talent. That's what I'm looking for, and fill it out. Another thing the Super Bowl taught us is you got to have depth. Kansas City took their best depth, the offensive lineman, and made him a starter. And then when other people went down, they ended up with that guy moving to tackle and Stefan Wisniewski playing guard, and they lost the Super Bowl. Like, they lost the Super Bowl for that. So we're going to lose a lot of people. We have people kind of positioned to move up, but that was our depth last year. We had good depth on the offensive line last year. If we promote them to starters, you've got to rebuild that depth, because offensive line, you're going to play 7 guys, 8 guys throughout the course of the season because people go down, people get hurt. It's gonna be a big process. I think they're gonna draft an offensive lineman. I want that 1st round tackle, man. That's my pick, and I'm hoping Pouncey comes back. If not, free agency. You got to sign somebody.
I've been looking a lot at this draft class. It seems like there's a good potential that that 1st round pick could be a tackle, but there is also a lot of teams with guys retiring. So I could see that 1st round pick being a position outside of the offensive line. I wouldn't be surprised. Of course, this team's heavily rumored to be watching Najee Harris pretty close. I'm definitely someone who's against drafting running backs high or paying for one, but it's possible they go down that avenue, especially because of how deep this tackle class is. 2nd round, it seems like one of those two centers, Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson, both kind of project guys. Creed Humphrey being a weird left-handed center. You don't see that often, and that kind of it does screw up the flow of things. The ball's getting to a quarterback's hands differently than it's ever been their entire career. Or Landon Dickerson, who's had his season ended 4 different years in a row via major injury surgery. So it's really one of those point years, and it's harder than usual to predict. But of course, that this free agency period is really going to open up a ton of eyes. But when it comes to guys on the line right now, do you expect, well, from the way Zach Banner's talking, it really seems like he'll be back. Do you kind of see those tackle spots right now being held down by Chuks Okorafor and Zach Banner?
That's likely. And especially if they walk into the draft with that, you got to think they're looking at a tackle, in the draft, because that would be perfect. Whoever doesn't, win the starting job, you have a swing tackle. You have a really good backup tackle. If you've got Banner, Chuks, and a rookie there, you're pretty well set. You got a good position on that. I could see, if you see a place where they re-sign Filer and move him back to right tackle, I'd be okay with that. Again, I'd be okay with that. But I could see those guys. I think they're going to try and stay as much continuity as they can, especially with Ben Roethlisberger coming back. You're going to see them keep as much of this group together as possible and add like a few key units. And especially, Kevin Dotson's going to be a nice addition to that line. So I'm excited about it. And I think they will. I think they'll try and stick with the tackles they have just because it's cheap. It's cheap and it gives you a lot of flexibility.
Something I'm seeing out of the chat right now, and what I was going to ask you next. The Steelers love themselves a reunion with former players. There's 2 that immediately jumps out to me. I think both guys have kind of taken a step back a little bit. Kelvin Beachum and BJ Finney. Could you see either of those 2 guys reuniting and kind of being the guys that round out the offensive line?
For depth, yeah. I don't think either of those guys would be signed for a starter. But as depth, yeah. And that actually just made me think of something I did want to mention. An old Steeler draft pick, A.Q. Shipley, who got a Super Bowl ring with Tampa Bay this season. That's one he's been left out a lot of. We've talked a lot about all the players and Steelers that are on those. Were on Tampa Bay. One we left out was A.Q. Shipley. But I would love to see them bring in a B.J. Finney for a backup. I don't think he'd be that expensive right now, and he would be good depth, and he'd be a good veteran. He knows the position, and he knows Ben.
Yeah, and he was only gone for 1 year. Of course, Finney, he looked terrible in Seattle, and he couldn't even crack like the backup roster in training camp. That was one of the big stories. Of course, myself being a West Coast guy, that was one of the things we heard a lot when it came to talking about that team. BJ Finney was like, oh, they signed him for a ton of money, but he's been terrible at camp. And then he gets dealt over to Cincinnati. I'm not really too sure. Dave Schofield is saying here in the chat that that is the wrong one, that he's still under contract, but I do believe he's one of the top kind of cap casualty names that have been thrown around. So that is true. He could be, he couldn't be. Well, I guess we'll see as the weeks go on. Of course, the waiver period is now open. But I guess with all that being said, we are at the top of the hour here. Jeffrey, what kind of fun, exciting stuff do we got from you coming out over the next couple of days?
Well, as soon as I actually hurt my shoulder, so I haven't been able to type. Like, it hurts to type my right shoulder. But as soon as I'm going to try and get out a bunch more on it tonight. I'm trying to get out my week 5. I've been doing my recap series where I look at the week and what we learned from that game. I'm up to week 5, and it's going to be all about Chase Claypool. And it's going to be good because I get to cover all the things that Chase Claypool does, his best usage, and where he needs to improve for the future. Because he was a rookie. There is room for improvement, and the sky is really the limit for that young man. But that was a great game, and he's a great person to cover. So that's coming out. That's all I got right now. I've been nursing a sore shoulder, so that's pretty much it. I had a bunch of stuff come out earlier this week, but that's it.
And we're looking forward to it. And you know what? I think the answer to the trivia question, who the curtain call talks about most on the show, Chase Claypool. That's probably a fair answer, and will probably be for the foreseeable future. Exactly. With that being said, I guess it's time to say goodbye. Make sure you're clicking over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Tons of stuff, especially as we move closer into the start of the new league year. We're going to be all over that Ben Roethlisberger extension whenever that comes down through the pipeline. Of course, check out the entire family of podcasts. If you're listening on YouTube or Facebook right now, we got exclusive stuff just when it comes to Apple Podcasts or Pandora, like anywhere, Spotify, you name it. If it plays podcasts, you can listen to us there. So make sure you're checking those out as well. Tons of great Steelers content. So thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight. Once again, for my co-host, Jeffrey Benedict, my name is Michael Beck. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you soon, I guess.